So what is your favorite topic when it comes down to medieval history? I guess for the most of you, it's the Vikings. For some reason, people are drawn to these bloodthirsty conquerors from the past. Did you know that apart from raiding, the Vikings also did a lot of trading all around Europe? So how is the Netherlands influenced by these Vikings? Consider its close proximity, there must be ties between the Dutch and the Vikings. Could there be Dutch Vikings? Well, some recent historical research gave us some interesting insights. So watch this video till the end, because in this video we're going to talk about the history of the Vikings in the Netherlands. Hey, welcome to History Hustle at Home. If you like this content, if you like this format, hey, if you like history, consider subscribing. Do hit the bell button to become part of the hustle. Let's start. Vikings originated from Scandinavia, present-day Denmark, Norway and Sweden. The Viking period is 750 till 1100 CE. Now, when hearing the word Viking, people envision these ruthless warriors with their horn helmets pillaging their way through Europe. Well, apart from the fact that research showed that the Vikings never worn horn helmets, the Vikings were, apart from raiders, also traders, craftsmen, settlers, colonizers as you will, and ingenious shipbuilders and navigators. And we're going to start by explaining the latter point. Because in order to cross such vast distances across seas and waterways, the Vikings needed to build proper ships. The Viking ships were strong and flexible. Sailing on such a ship, you would notice it was easy to maneuver. This is because most of the people that lived in what is now Norway lived on the coastlines, and there were a lot of fjords there. So you needed ships that were easy to maneuver, else you would crash on the rocks. The Viking ships could be maneuvered by sails and oars. They were made not too deep in order to sail shallow waterways. Now, when talking about Viking ships alone, there could be books written full about it. So if you are an expert and you feel something is missing out, feel free to leave a comment down below. The Vikings were skilled fighters too, using swords, shields, spears and axes. They had a severe fighting mentality. I quote what a Viking said here: "Better it is to die in battle with honor than to live in shame because you did not defend your people." So let's get to the juicy stuff, the plundering, the raiding, the pillaging. Why did the Vikings do that? Well, there were external and internal reasons for this. Let's start with the external ones. Okay, for the external cause, we need to go back to the year of 800 when Charles the Great founded the Carolingian Empire. Now, he had a Christian motive and he wanted to Christianize the people of Europe. Now, in present-day Germany, that's where the Saxons lived, and they had their own religion, paganism. Now, according to the Carolingians, those who refused Christ were heretics and needed to be killed or exiled. And this led to some severe clashes between the Carolingian armies and the Saxons, especially when Charles the Great burned down the Irminsul. It was a wooden pillar that functioned as a holy shrine for the Saxons. Scholars agree that this event triggered the Norsemen, who had close ties with the Saxons, to go out for plunder with the disregard of the human suffering they inflicted on the Christians. Also, the Vikings weren't as united as the Christians were, so they knew they had no chance in a full-scale battle. So therefore, they needed to find a soft spot. I'll get to this in a second. Let's look at the internal causes first. So let's take a look at Norseman culture and why the Vikings started to plunder. Okay, the Norseman culture is very fascinating and very broad. It goes from the Norse mythologies to the sagas to democratic institutions. Yep, the Vikings were more democratic than you might think. But what you need to know for now, and what we're going to focus on now, is the inheritance laws. Okay, when a Norseman died, his eldest son inherited everything, and the younger siblings gained nothing. So therefore, there was a surplus of men that had basically no income. So they needed to find income, and that became plundering. With small raiding parties, they attacked places that weren't properly defended or defended at all and had a great source of wealth. A place normal Christians wouldn't dare to touch, and I'm talking about the monasteries. In 793, the Vikings attacked the British island of Lindisfarne. The monks were killed and the monastery was plundered. And present-day England was not the only place for Viking raids. Now let's take a look at the Netherlands, historically referred as the Low Countries. The biggest coastal area belonged to the Frisian kingdom, yet this kingdom was absorbed by the Frankish Empire after the Battle of the Boyne in 734. Yet the Frankish Empire crumbled mid-9th century, and it was then when the Vikings made their move. Over the course of the 9th and the 10th century, Dutch coastal towns were often raided by the Vikings. The Vikings sailed up the rivers of the Low Countries and attacked the Dutch city of Dorestad. It was a trading city that does not exist anymore. It was sacked 4 times by the Vikings and was at some point never rebuilt. Dorestad is located where now the Dutch town of Wijk bij Duurstede is located. In 850, the Dutch city of Utrecht was captured as well. The Viking responsible was the Danish Viking Rorik of Dorestad, who became known after the Dutch city he had sacked. So this implies that the Vikings did settle, although they never came in large numbers. They can be considered as colonizers. It goes even further than that. They made alliances with nearby rulers, and therefore Vikings became vassals, and therefore they got involved in several conflicts that were waged on continental Europe. Now looking at Flanders, that area came under Viking attack from 851 till 864, when the Vikings sailed up the Schelde River and attacked the Flanders city of Ghent. Since the Frankish Empire was in decline and no proper resistance was offered, the Vikings preferred raiding over trading. The impact on daily life must be tremendous, but must not be exaggerated. This is what we see in the sources, because those who wrote about the Vikings were those who were able to write. And who were those? Well, those were the clerks. And these people became victims of the Vikings, since the Vikings often plundered churches and monasteries because of its wealth. So therefore the clerks had every reason to portray the Vikings as the demons from hell. In 920, Utrecht was taken by the East Frankish king Henry the Fowler, who came from what is now Germany. And the Viking raids came to an end at the beginning of the 11th century. Up until that time, they did occur, but less frequently. Now, in the 13th century, there was a lot of sagas. Sagas were basically stories written in Old Norse about the Vikings. So these were more of a fictional account, a narrative as you will, and can provide us with information about the Vikings, but they must not be considered as historically accurate. Speaking of historically accurate, recent history from 2017 that was done by the Dutch researcher Nelleke IJsselnagger proved that there was a structural relationship between the Vikings and the Frisians. She did some impressive research where she investigated material and written accounts. When studying the written accounts, which really varied by the way from poems to law texts to sagas, they all seem to mention the cultural exchange between the Vikings and the Frisians. As for items that were found in the north of the Netherlands, think of golden rings, brooches and pins, they were of the same model as those that were found in Scandinavia and England. She basically states that the former Frisian territories at the dawn of the Viking Age belonged to the Frankish Empire, were under constant influence by 2 spheres, the northern Viking culture and the Frankish continental culture. We can thus state that Frisia forms its identity in relation to the Viking sphere in a larger degree than we previously taught. As such, it can be seen as structuring and fundamental to society. Frisia, though its position and its liminal zones of 2 spheres, becomes a depot for wealth and cultural negotiation. Nevertheless, it remains between 2 centers and as such does not become the central focus of either spheres with which it is connected. So yeah, therefore we can say that there is no such thing as Dutch Vikings. So the Vikings did have some close ties with Frisia in the Netherlands, referred to as Friesland. In the next video, I will talk about the history of Frisia. So therefore, I advise you to subscribe so you don't miss out. Now, if you want to know more about a country that was also heavily influenced by Viking culture, check out the video that I recorded about the history of Iceland. Click it right here. I shot that one on location in Reykjavik. I have a Patreon page, so if you want to support me, please do so I can deliver you more awesome content. I want to thank you for watching. See you later.